Do you want to introduce it?
No.
It'd be good practice.
No.
What are you going to do when we do this next year, huh?
Yeah.
We're not going to do an introduction.
Alright, bitches, pay attention. It's Article 1.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our last week of the semester for News from the Real World Comments, where we talk about the 10 top articles of this past week. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then we will start analyzing the articles. So first we have...
Hi, I'm Parker. I'm a first-year stage and production manager, grad student.
Hi everyone, I'm Derek. I'm a second-year costume production grad.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm a second-year sound grad.
I'm Damien. I'm a third-year costume design grad.
I'm Jessica. I'm a third-year costume design grad.
And I'm Allie. I'm a third-year SMPM grad. So we're actually going to...
That was such a professional beginning. we are
Just take our momentum.
That was great.
Yes,
So
logo.
our first article is our favorite buzzword. Productivity is not working. It's the title of the article. It is written by Lori Penny on Wired.com. It's a very interesting article. It touches kind of on the same topic we've discussed quite a bit as of late, productivity. This quote kind of sums up the tone of the article well. Productivity, or the lack of it, has become the individual metric of choice for coping with the international econopathological clusterfuck of the corona crisis.
Please tell me that's actually, was that a
That's a
line?
legitimate quote.
That's actually a great quote.
It is a
Yeah.
beautiful sentence, and I strongly agree with what this article is saying. Basically, he's making all of the same points we've been discussing, that we shouldn't feel pressured even though everyone else is making and all of these things are going on, you know, like that shouldn't, productivity doesn't define us. Productivity does not equal health is another big thing he was talking about. And really the work has become taking care of others. He's a writer and he talks about how they structured their work heavily at the beginning of the process and had post-it notes and day-to-day exactly what was supposed to happen, and within a few days that was completely out the window. And that the goal became not, like, it's weirdly focused on roommates and like roommate interaction as well. And the day-to-day goal became not killing your roommates, and they relate that to like, that's everyone's goal. You know, it's no longer about getting work done, it's about not killing the people you're living with, which was a little bit of a harsh way or weird way of putting it, but
So violent.
it was violent, as the quote kind of chaotic, but it was a good article. I agree.
One of the comments that was brought up, Elizabeth Purnell talked about how the cult of the hustle,
Right.
and like that whole thing where it's just like, and especially it's interesting like at CMU, because this is something we talk about a lot, where it's like not competition in like me over you, but it's like, how hard did you work? I worked really hard too. You know, it's very interesting where it's like, no, you don't have to produce right now. And like you said, it's everything that we've been talking about. But I did think that phrase was interesting too, the cult of the hustle.
And they also kind of talk about how a recession is coming. Like that's a fact at this point.
It's here.
And it's for the first time not something that the greater we as like a society are responsible for. Was like the take on it. Like it wasn't a stock market crash based on a mistake someplace. Like it was, there's nothing that we could have done. So that makes this a unique type of situation for recession.
That's interesting. To consider that the recession doesn't really have somebody that we can blame it on is like
Right.
very interesting.
And I do find it interesting that like it's not a geographically situated recession. You know what I mean? It's not anything that happened in one specific place and like the whole rest of the world is going on without it, and then that one place is behind. It's like it's hitting everything. Everything.
I don't really have a great transition.
Who's gonna?
Sorry, me neither. I was trying to think of
But my articles, it sounds like it would be a good segue, but it's not really. Oh wait, no, this is it. Sorry, I thought my other article was the first one. Sorry, everyone. I don't, full disclosure, I don't have a computer right now. I'm doing this on my phone, so I like have old school notes. Oh,
yes.
so I have no idea what's going on the internet. But this first article is called Work-Life Balance, Leveling the Seesaw. It's by Paul Winans from Remodeling online publication. Basically, the gist of the article is that balance is important, of course, and that it is essentially all up to you. And that if you want to achieve balance, like things have to give in the sense that a seesaw has to give, and you can't cram everything in. Time is limited. Yeah, it was a pretty simple message, but that in that you making your choices of your balance, they're like really interrelated, and that is like all your personal responsibility based on your values and what you want out of your life. Elena Q, I think I'm saying their name right on the comments, said it feels as though their time is wasted and they're not productive enough, not going down their to-do list. And then Sierra Young said, CMU drama students have one of the most horrific senses of work-life balance in the world. And I kept reading these comments and they all just say the same thing, is that like all of the undergrads really struggle with that. And I've experienced that as a grad student. And a lot of the students are expressing that right now in particular, it's really hard to focus with the lack of boundaries, and that like balance can't happen when your boundaries are really confused. So I just want to like give a message to all of them that like, be nice to yourself. You're doing amazing work under the circumstances if you're even working right now. And you're doing great.
Yeah.
I watched a
Be kind
video.
to yourself. It's good.
I actually watched a video today about, how to like keep that balance. And it was really talking about making sure you have separate spaces in your life that are solely dedicated to creative things or to relaxing or to sleep, and really kind of keeping sanctity and purpose of those spaces completely separate. And doing so is so incredibly important, because like if you start to meals or do your relaxing at a place that you've set up to do work, when you get there you can't get into the work mindset. Like if you get to a library then you can work, or if you're somewhere in the theater building it's focused, you can work. This is where I eat, this is where I sleep, this is where I whatever to pass time or stress.
I totally agree. I think it's also important to acknowledge that it is very much a privilege to have boundaries in all of those spaces, and that especially right now, like how can we expect anyone to be able to divide their physical spaces like in any kind of way like that.
Those of us in video apartments are screwed.
Yeah.
A big thing for me that I learned like a lot later in life was that just because you get an email at 7:30 p.m. doesn't mean that that's an important email for you to answer. So if it's truly an emergency, someone will call you. And just like maybe putting like, oh, I answer emails between 8:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. And then anything after that, if it's a true emergency, call me, or I can get to it in the morning. So that way you do carve out space away from your email, which is very important. And that has helped me a lot kind of figure out how my work balance is, and then also what my priorities are throughout my day.
Yeah, the article mentioned something really interesting about how you have to prioritize your life first, and you put those things in your calendar, the things that will matter to you on your deathbed, checking in with your friends, making time with family, you meditating, self-care, whatever those things are going to be, that you put those in your calendar first, and then you put your work calendar in the spaces that are still open. And like, I laughed out loud when I read that, because if I ever tried to do that, like in my industry or in this school, I would get fired, or I would not make it through school. I wouldn't pass through school. So it's just like, kind of sounds like a little bit of a pipe dream, but maybe we're having a big revelatory moment of how we can change these things.
I mean, I think, I do want to say though, I think it does come down to self-policing and making sure that you are accountable for creating those spaces. Because I think a lot of people, it's like the school has expectations, but like you are not, I feel like, I mean, I can't speak for all departments, but I have, in the 3 years that I've been here, like within our department, I have learned that they have expectations, but if you're struggling to meet the expectations, like I've been able to be pretty vocal, like on one-on-one meetings, and say that if I'm struggling with something, and I'm thinking a lot back to my first year, because I know first year for designers is pretty tough, but like, I will say, like, Jess and I, our first semester, we made it a point, like when we were traveling to Connecticut every week, like every 2 weeks, we would pretty much stay on top of our work in a way that ended up feeling very healthy. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were very much on top of making sure that we still had, like, I don't know. I kind of want to like applaud us, because I think there was something that we did really well that year in terms of just making sure that we stuck to this is our time and school is not going to intrude in this time, but also making sure that we put in the extra work.
Yeah, speaking of that, it was like, I think what I find like working from home different from going to a space is that I have time to look at like the actual literal time frame that I do that work in. Like if I'm at school, I know that like from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm there and I'm working or whatever, but I know that my day is broken down into, okay, I have an hour and a half to work on this. I have 2 hours here. So I try to do that at home as well as like, okay, like especially with finishing our thesis, like it could go on forever and ever and ever. And like, if you don't have it, you will continue to work on it for literally forever. And so it's like, okay, if I have 6 hours to work on it today, I did good, the end. And then speaking to the productivity, being like, great, even if I hit 4 hours, I'm like, that's good. I did something, it's whatever it is. But yeah, it can be hard for some people to work from home too. Like some people are good. Like I can't work from a coffee shop. Some people are really good at working in coffee shops. I think it kind of depends on what you are comfortable with, really. Yeah.
I don't have a good transition for this one either. I think actually maybe between the first two there was a better one, but this one is just cool. So take it away.
So looking back at 50 years of Earth Day on how specifically Variety magazine and Hollywood kind of reported it, looked at it, what they did for it. It was just kind of a self-reflection done by Variety and what they have done, and some of Hollywood's leaders in this kind of ecological fight and what they've done for Earth Day on more or less the big holidays of, you know, the 20th, 30th, 40th, and now 50th anniversary of the original Earth Day. That's really all it talked about. It was just, hey, you know, it's Earth Day, everything's shut down, but we're still here, we're still fighting for our Earth. This is kind of our history about it. It was a neat article.
Literally the only good thing about this, well, one of the only good things about this is like seeing those maps where the pollution tracker has found, like, and it's just like gone away and it's gotten so much better. It's like the only source of hope.
It's so cool. Like it really is cool. And then I was reading an article the other day that was saying that post-COVID, like it does change the necessity of people going out and commuting to their jobs now that we know that we can do this. Like if we don't have to continue going, if there's an office, that's great. But if you don't have to continue going in 5 days a week, maybe it's 2 days a week, even that action will reduce carbon emissions and we'll be able to keep up the progress that we've made. And I think that that's such an interesting idea to sit here and be like, I wonder what the future will look like and what, like, how, I know some jobs obviously you have to do in person, but if you don't have to, taking that step is a really interesting forward momentum. I love Earth Day.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, a little pessimistic view. I am continually shocked how humanity is hell-bent on its own destruction. Even given like the facts. So I wonder if, because this is such a like visual, like a strong visualization of like what can happen, it's like, are we actually going to take this and make it, you know, better moving forward? And like, are we going to learn from this, or are we just going to go back to being stupid?
I hope so. I think like post-COVID, we could just have like a millennial revolution, and then we can just start fixing things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I said it here first, y'all.
I love it.
Well, speaking of fixing things and working on fixing yourself, so in Lighting and Sound America, it's an article that is, I actually couldn't find who it was written by, but it's Behind the Scenes Launches Entertainment Industry Therapist Finder. So I think a couple of weeks ago, or this might have been last semester, we were, you know, hearing about behind the scenes, and they were putting together like almost like a mental health initiative specifically for entertainment industry professionals. And it sounds like they've finally kind of launched this resource where you can find therapists and counselors that have a better understanding of what we do as entertainment industry professionals. So it was coming from a point where, like, I think there were people that were expressing frustration over the fact that a lot of the times expectations that were set by just like standard therapists, or just therapists that were like not as savvy in terms of how the, you know, entertainment industry schedules work. Out of that frustration, they've put together essentially just a database where you can find therapists that understand the type of work that we do, understand the type of hours that we work, and basically kind of have a grasp of how to schedule things and how to speak to people in our industry. So it's a pretty great tool. You can do, you know, you have the option to do searches by location in terms of also like what insurances they accept, if there's a specific area that the therapists specialize in. And then you can also do more of an advanced search where you start looking at like their theoretical approaches, as well as like credentials that the therapists hold, or like if there's a specific population that they work with, or even a specific language. So it is a great resource. The website is btshelp.org/findatherapist. I didn't actually click through the database itself, just because, like, I mean, I saw it, I understood it. I am, you know, blessed to say that I have a therapist who is very just sort of open-minded and understands, like, when I say, hey, this is how this works, and she's actually, you know, pretty on top of like that sort of understanding. But it's a great tool that I think if you don't have a therapist, or if you're unhappy with how your therapist approaches your schedule, it's definitely worth looking into, finding someone who'll have a better grasp. Yeah.
That's honestly a really great resource. I've, with my previous therapist, very open about theater as well, and I haven't specifically run into that as an issue, but it's really cool to know that that resource is available and that's out there.
Absolutely.
And especially now, like in all of the comments that students left, it was very much like, I'm so glad that this exists, like specifically now. And so, yeah, I mean, like in what we do, and also the fact that like the very nature of what we do is, you know, changed by this and has to be. So that, you know, just that fact, that looming new normal or whatever it is that we're going towards in theater is a huge mental toll.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of times in therapy, what a lot of the work that happens is like teasing out parts of your identity and finding ways to filter therapists based on like your identity. Like finding a queer-oriented therapist for someone queer identifying can be really powerful, and like being able to divide like your identity and be able to filter it like through therapist finding services can be really helpful for people in general.
Yeah. Looking more into
Therapy is important. Get it, kids.
Yeah.
Life is too difficult and too important to not get help.
Well, the costume designer for Suicide Squad needed some help, so
There we go.
and please do all of the transitions always.
well,
I don't even know. Yeah, there was like nothing that I could do there for like that at all. So okay, when I got this assigned, I had been wanting to watch Birds of Prey, and so I went ahead and did that. But this article is Suicide Squad director responds fairly thoughtfully to Harley Quinn costume criticism by Princess Weeks, and it was written on 420 for the Mary Sue. And so basically what has happened is like not Suicide Squad, Birds of Prey just came out, and I watched it. I liked it a lot. I'm hypersensitive to how women are portrayed in film, especially in like shoot 'em up action combat films, which I love. Like I love me a good crime thriller to any sort of comic book action film. And I do find it really funny that like women are always in heels. Like for example, to talk about Jurassic Park and oh God, what's her name?
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard is running around in heels in a cream suit the whole time. And they kind of make a joke about it in one of the subsequent ones and or like reference it or something. And it's like, oh, okay, like let's definitely talk about that. Women are always running or fighting in heels. It just is. And this article is sort of comparing, like, we're talking about the reaction that David Ayer, the director of the 2016 Suicide Squad movie, had to a bunch of comments about the difference in Harley Quinn's costume from Suicide Squad to Birds of Prey. And the two main things there is that I think that these two movies exist in a perfect way for us to directly compare a male gaze directed film to a female gaze directed film. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that that's actually a really good thing. We get to look at a single genre around a single character, and how Suicide Squad was filmed with the male gaze. Her costume was hypersexualized but accurate to the comic books, which are also designed in male gaze and are problematic. And the movie was always going to be that way. There's no sexy gaze of Will Smith. There's like one of him doing a pull-up. Good job. But nothing like Legend. And but like Birds of Prey was so good, I thought, because it was a big stride forward in really smart costuming. So if you go back and watch Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn's wearing this like fluffy jacket, and it's actually made out of like caution tape. And it looks like every article of her clothing is something that Harley Quinn made herself. So I think that movie was really great. And obviously, by comparison to Suicide Squad it just pales in comparison. So I think this is a really interesting conversation to constantly be having. And I think these two movies do exist in a really good way for that comparison to be made.
This doesn't have to do with costuming, but my mom and I were just watching, we've been watching a lot of movies because there's nothing else to do. Yeah. So we watched Harriet the other night, and it was really, really good. And there's deleted scenes. And I mean, thinking about that, like, there's nothing about any of the costumes on any of the women where you're like, oh, like that's sexy, because that would just be weird. But there was a scene that was taken out where you find that Leslie Odom Jr.'s character like has feelings for her, and she's like, but you're married, and they have this whole scene, and like it didn't get put into the movie. They put it as the extra scenes. And my mom and I were talking about it, and I was like, I'm really glad it wasn't in the movie, because that's not the point. Like, this is not supposed to be about a love affair. Like, oh my goodness. It's like, that's not the point. So it was just interesting. And like, yeah, it was produced by 2 women, one of color, and then it was directed by a woman of color. So like, let's tell the story. Let's not tell a story from, you know, us.
I also think like with the advent of shows like, and I know everyone's tired of me bringing up Outlander, but Outlander's shot female gaze, and it's, you know, by comparison to like Game of Thrones, which is obviously shot male gaze, it's, you're kind of looking at like, okay, like, not that male gaze movies can't have substance, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, it gets tiring of looking at a female on screen constantly being sexualized. And if she's on screen, she's hitting like a 5-character range. And then, you know, for some weird reason, like, why is she not wearing a coat when everyone else is wearing a coat? Or like, why is this person who's supposed to be like a ninja pro wearing a pair of heels to like a strip club? Like, you think that she would be wearing at least a wedge. Just saying. So it's
Barely healed something.
I mean, I also did want to add, like, this isn't the first time that this sort of thing happens. Like, I think back to like when Wonder Woman came out a couple of years ago, in comparison to like the women from the Justice League movie. That's not like what's, you know. You let it happen again. You let it happen again. Like, just admit your faults and don't try to say like that. You don't try to back up. Just admit it. Like, yeah, you fucked up. So. Well,
he was saying too. He was like, I was just trying to tell a story. I'll do better next time. But I think that's also the conversation that people need to be having when they're revamping older movies, or upcycling these comic books. Is like, the comic books are problematic in and of itself in its imagery, because of how it not only represents women, but also how it does represent males. And it's not, if you're going to revamp the story for a modern audience, like, I think you need to update not just the story or the origin story, but also how they look and how they play into the climate of the world at large. My feelings.
Yeah, for what it's worth, like things like Steven Universe are really popular because they are not from the binary gaze, which is pretty cool. Like, there's I will give credit where it's due with, you know, things male gaze and things from the female gaze, but there's also like a whole world of content that is from other gazes as well.
That's very true. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I'm gonna watch this. I just Googled
it. Shifting gears a little bit, an article posted on Theme Park Insider, how Will COVID-19 affect the design of Universal's new theme park, written by Robert Niles? I will preface this with, this is a world I am not familiar with. This is something that I don't know much about in terms of theme park. I just didn't know a lot of the things that were in this article, so it was really interesting to me. The first half kind of gives an overview of how COVID has been affecting theme parks, and right now they're all closed, but they're planning for what opening looks like and when they can open. They're talking about doing queues, like lines to get into these rides virtually, so you're waiting on your phone and you can be walking around the park, and there's like all of these different ideas circled around it, what hygiene looks like, how many people are permitted into the park at a time. There are all like questions that have come up, right? But what the article is really focusing on is a new park called Epic Universe, which I had known nothing about. Apparently it's somewhat of a big deal. It's supposed to open in 2023, and it's projected to be the most state-of-the-art theme park that we've seen. And it's Universal's kind of challenge to Disney is what it kind of came out as. And it's got all of it goes into detail about the plans for this park and these water features and everything, and it's very, very cool. But now it's become this huge question of what will that park actually look like, because there are so many years between now and then. We don't know. The article argued that a solution may not, like a concrete solution may not be in effect by 2023, which is a terrifying thought. And you know, kind of hard to read, but it is also not a medical article. It's an article about theme parks. So take that as you will. Really interesting article. the end kind of point is that it won't be designing down this new park, and they won't be paring it down at all. If anything, they'll be adding new features. And none of the design team have been laid off. They're now just all working from home. So nobody's been taken off the project either, which is cool.
That's good. Maybe they can just add more bathrooms, more water stations, and make sure that the, first aid people are within 60 feet of each other at each booth. Because when I go to theme parks, I just never see any first aid.
Right.
Like, where is it? And bathrooms can always be better. Just a suggestion.
Bathrooms are gross.
Sammy Williams.
That's a bathrooms.
Sammy Williams brings up that it stated that this pandemic is going to change people's sense of what is comfortable, which I think is something that I've been thinking about for a bit now. It's like even after stuff opens up, and even after it is safe, like the cultural shift that this is going to create. Like if I was I don't know, oh my God, because even thinking about that, right? Like even thinking about like, no, I'm not standing in line 6 inches from a person, but like I'm walking around a theme park certainly less than 6 feet from a person. Like, oh, that's not
cruise
So
already.
clearly-
He was like, well, I don't want to be around people.
it's going to be very weird. Like people's sense of what is comfortable is going to be so different.
And it's going to be a wide range because clearly some people don't care as is,
Surely.
let alone, 6 months, year, 18 months from now.
The article even says those that have lived through the COVID virus will be affected differently and will have different expectations of a new theme park. And just that sentence in itself kind of packs so much weight as to like what we are living through. Like, yes, we're slapped with a sentence like that every day, but that one, got to me today.
It is.
I have another sentence we've been hearing a lot. Must the show go on?
Wait, hold on.
Why are all these about productivity?
Yeah,
That's all people want to talk about.
I want
must the show go on during the COVID-19 outbreak? From the Japan Times, written by Nobuko Tanaka. And I should note that this was written on March 27th, which feels like 10 universes ago at this point. But it is so eerie, and a lot of the comments said this reading the tone of this article and how much things have changed since then. Basically in Japan, the Prime Minister Abe said to use your best judgment, basically, to all of the theater companies, and some of them closed, most of them didn't, and the majority of them were like telling patrons to just wear masks and sanitize their hands before they came in the theaters.
I bet this has changed now, 33 days later.
You can hope.
Yeah, I would hope so. But also, like, even March 27th, like, there's enough information around that, like, I would not think anyone would want to go to a theater and sit next to people. I don't know, even if you have a mask on.
Again,
That's just me.
clearly people do not care.
I don't know. I would say like when I lived in Japan, everybody wore masks everywhere all the time. And I would say like the general cleanliness and like attitude towards like just breathing on each other is considered rude. And so everyone wears masks. So I can imagine that maybe at that time they were like, oh, it's not like just continue to do what you're doing because already we're doing better than everyone else. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Like the fact that New Yorkers don't wear masks, like even as a New Yorker, I'm like disgusted by the subways, and it's much cleaner. I don't know if that's a generalized statement, but yes.
No, you're right. Like generally it is much cleaner. Like just everything is like there's subways
Yeah.
are
When I got sick and I went to the doctor, it was just a small head cold and I was required to wear a mask for 2 weeks, baseline requirement. So I thought was really interesting. I can imagine, and I would like practices like that to be executed over here in the health system, that if you go and you're sick and you have a head cold, like it is required that you wear it for 2 weeks by doctor's orders or something like that. Yeah.
Their population is just so much more dense in those countries that it's almost a necessity out of just normal.
It's also like a cultural politeness too. Like it's rude to touch your nose and it's rude to breathe on people. And so being in someone else's space like that it's just not part of the culture as well. So social distancing already a thing in a way.
In the comments, a student named Natsumi Buro commented that they were talking a lot about their own personal experiences traveling to and from Japan. And they said that moment of carelessness of when those theaters were open led to a rapid rise in infections 2 weeks later.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's terrifying. I'm also interested to see, by comparison, like the rise in coronavirus here in the United States post the protests.
Yeah.
If that can be directly to.
But the general sentiment from the comments was that theater is 100% non-essential. You know, no matter how attached we all are to it and how much we love it and how hard we want to work, like it is not an essential thing that we need.
Well, it's so weird, like essential for, everyday survival, no, but for the hearts and minds of people, it's absolutely essential, for the greater culture of the United States and other countries around the world. So it's interesting how we want to specifically define and kind of put into a container, what currently is essential.
But it's not a basic need. I mean, it's like not essential in that sense. Like we don't need it to survive.
Well,
like
yeah,
that's.
It's what's the dude's name? Hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Hannah, I will vote for you as the president of the National Endowment of the Arts.
Now everyone getting money.
So thinking about theater playing an integral role in society.
Nice.
So Cirque has obviously made its mark on culture. So the last days of Cirque du Soleil, how COVID-19 brought down an entertainment empire on Fast Company, by Christopher Zara. So the title of this is very dark, but it, and then underneath, it says like that they're remaining optimistic. So I think it's a little bit of a shocker article, and I think it's meant to be a shocker article. It talks about how Cirque had to close down. There was a show that they had in China, which was their only permanent offering in China, called The Land of Fantasy, that they had to shut down immediately. They canceled performances of it, and they also closed one in Rome, like shortly thereafter. And even those two closings, they were like, well, it's okay. Like those two are big and they were new and we had already sold a lot of tickets and everything, but it'll be okay. And then once it really hit Vegas, and Mar got a call from MGM saying, we're closing down everything on the Strip, they realized that it was going to be pretty impactful, because that is 35% of their revenue, just Vegas alone, which is pretty substantial when you think like how far-reaching Cirque is across the globe. So this, went into detail about how they experienced that, the whole thing that we've all heard about, Lamar calling all of his employees and 95% of them being laid off and stuff like that. It goes into detail about choices that, like business choices that they made prior to that, though. A couple of business deals that were made like earlier, like in 2015, I think, 2016, and how those repercussions wouldn't have affected them as badly, and then the pandemic hit. So, you know, it goes into detail about all of this, talks about the performers and their lives right now and how they're trying to keep, not in shape, but like in practice, because it's so physical, and if they don't, then like, are they going to actually be able to come back?
So much of that body control is a perishable skill, and if you're not keeping at it, it goes away very, very quickly.
I've been thinking about that a lot with the professional sports complex, and just like all of these professional athletes that are losing all of their conditioning, and it's just wild, like the consequences of that.
I wouldn't be surprised though, like in terms of equipment, if like the NFL or like the specific team organization, like if they're providing some sort of resource or something for them to maintain like that momentum.
I guess I'm thinking more of like independent Olympic athletes that aren't a part of large conglomerate corporations. Yeah.
Because the multi-million dollar, you know, football and basketball and hockey players probably have some nice setups in their, you know, homes or backyards.
Even beyond just like conditioning in that way, like being a part of a physical game with physically other people in the room, like that skill set of quick judgment and that kind of aspect is totally not being exercised in the way that it usually is.
So yeah, the
dancers.
It was
last week's article.
They don't have a union, which I found very interesting.
Yes, correct.
They don't have anything specific, or they're not on some weird subset of Actors Equity.
And so it just, it talks about, like I said, I think it was a big shocker title. Lamar is very confident that they'll be back. I do think, even with all of the detail about all of the economic troubles that they're going through and their junctures and stuff like that, they're partnering. I would be surprised that like Cirque doesn't have enough to sustain itself monetarily. I think the big thing is like keeping the highly, technological equipment like in good shape and stuff like that, and keeping their people in good shape is definitely a concern. But like, I would like to think that maybe they've made some sort of profit in all of the years that they've been functioning, that they can kind of sustain themselves for a little bit.
If anyone gets hired,
Go ahead. I was gonna shit on the cruise industry.
Oh, hold on. I was gonna say, if anyone gets hired by Cirque, make sure that one of your follow-up interview questions is, how did you handle your employees during the COVID crisis? That should be everyone's question to every employer after we get out of this, because I think that the article is really interesting, but I also wonder like how many people are going to be wanting to invest in Cirque. I mean, companies bounce back like nothing, but I feel like there should be repercussions there for how they treated their employees.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying.
I was actually, this is not about this article, but I had a conversation with a friend last night who was talking about the theater that she was working at, that she had worked at. She's furloughed right now, but she was like, their donors are actually very unhappy with the company because they took so long to shut down.
Wow.
Because they treated their employees not great. And they were like, we are giving you our money and we believe in the work that you're producing, but you are not taking care of your people, and you were so slow in doing the right thing. And I was, that was a big statement. I was surprised by that.
Even multi-billionaires, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, specifically said that, companies will be judged based on how they reacted and treated their workers, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like after the fall in 2009 or 2008.
Yep.
People were like, well, what happened? Like, what did you do? But, companies still bounce back.
Ruth Chris's steakhouse goes under because they stole money from small businesses. I ain't going to complain.
So, speaking about kind of transitioning back, and will we still have people who are interested in coming to see our shows?
Allie knows that I'm so bad at transitions.
No, I am so bad at transitions.
No, got this.
These
I honestly
are gold. I don't know what y'all are talking about. We are on fire here.
This article is by the Theater Times, written, it says posted by, but I say written by Daniel Johnston, and it's The Power of Proximity and the Theater of Touch, What Losing Live Audiences May Mean for Theater. And I think this goes back to sort of what we've been already hitting, points that we've already been hitting on about like how will theater change and what does the COVID-19 disease mean for humanity as far as how we socially interact. And I thought this article was really nice. It was like a good introspective philosophical article. It had some really nice quotes and points of view, a little bit of history. I love that. But what it does pose at the end of it, you know, it talks about how like touch is very important. And I think too, you know, moments in a crowd when I'm listening to live music, being around people in that moment with them loving the thing and just enjoying the general vibe is so much a part of live performance. And everything from sitting and viewing a play to doing interactive fourth dimension wall breakdown is so part of like how we communicate and like how, you know, we say like technology will never take over the human touch and the human interaction. And I think that that's a given. This article is sort of just posing a question of like, what could theater look like if people don't want to touch each other or they don't want to be around each other? Or what would it look like if we don't have audiences? Like, where does that human connection come from? That was interesting. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I like how they talk about, you know, the Black Plague and how that affected audiences and didn't affect audiences during the time of the Globe Theater's height, and you know how it was shut down for a number of years during the height of it in London. Yeah,
the connection they made to the Black Plague and shutting down the Globe to COVID and shutting down Broadway, I think is really interesting. You know,
I heard somewhere in an article or on the internet somewhere last week that was like, we gather around storytellers because we need to hear stories, and that it's a part of like our not necessarily our like individual DNA, but like our collective DNA and how we tell stories to, you know, continue living as a species. And I just like, you know, humans are ingenious, and how will we figure out how to gather? How will we problem solve gathering? Because we still need to hear stories. And I think that's really fascinating.
I think a lot of this has become negative and being like, oh, what will happen after? What will change after? But I think speaking to what you were saying, Derek, like the human species needs to communicate. So I think the question is like, how will we change? How will we alter? And how will we grow? And like, how will we find connection through a media source? You know, we did it through carrier pigeons. We did it through writing notes. We've done it through email. We do it through text. Like we will always find ways to communicate with each other. And all you have to do is just bring value to that communication is what keeps it like alive versus, you know, not doing that. It was eloquent up until that point.
No, but I do think that the article has a point of like, I'm interested to see even, okay, so there's like levels, right? The cultural shift. So like even after audiences are okay coming into a theater and seeing it again, like if I look up on stage and people are like hitting each other, like joking around, like touching each other so much, I'm gonna be like,
oh yeah, you'll remember COVID. You'll be like, oh my God, they're kissing. Oh no, did they rehearse that? Yeah.
They go together. Where's your mask?
Oh, that's funny. Maybe I did like the idea of McBee and watching Lady McBee like wash her hands over and over again. I was like, ooh, set it in post-COVID or in COVID world. I can't wait to see how many productions will do.
Wait.
I haven't even thought about that. The amount of like
it turns into a
adaptations.
It turns into a comedic moment, and she sings 20 seconds of a song. Oh my God!
Oh my God!
Twice.
She's like, I love it.
Wow.
Honestly, think about it, guys. It's a whole genre narrative that we haven't even hit on yet.
We're learning so many things in COVID.
I don't like this.
Yeah, we are.
There.
I no.
Okay.
No.
Learning in Lockdown, a training roundup
I
by
don't wanna
AV Magazine. Well, we're gonna keep going. We're just gonna barrel through. So in this article, I mean, it wasn't so much an article as just more of a resource. It's literally a list of different companies, organizations that are offering new skills through webinars, lessons, like just, yeah. Basically, we have time now. A lot of us have more time than usual, but it's specifically geared for audiovisual professionals. It's a very extensive list. I'm not gonna lie, didn't check every organization. I just kind of scrolled through the list because there's a lot of them and they don't pertain to me specifically, but it was like, yeah, so that's all I have.
Thank you, everybody.
I was talking to a company yesterday, whatever. They're a consulting firm for emergency preparedness. It was for my thesis. And like,
Nice.
they were talking about how they're encouraging their clients to like strengthen their procedures now. And they're trying to like get new clients during this time, because a large factor in like places that don't have emergency plans in place is that like they don't have the time, they don't have the focus, they don't have the people to do it during their regular operation. So like, this is a great time.
Get all the certifications you can.
Yeah.
I know in the audio world, most of us have gotten Dante certified, at least somewhat, just to have something on the resume.
I don't know what that means.
Me neither.
But
But I know Linda.
But great.
picking up new stuff to add to the resume, you know.
But I know Linda.
I know LinkedIn
Where are
Learning.
you going with that transition, Allie?
No, I just said like picking up new things during this time that like you can add to the resume. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn right. I already put it on my resume, so I should
Masterclass.
probably learn it.
This is the time to download Duolingo and make yourself learn a new language.
I've been doing that.
What are you learning, Anna?
I am learning Japanese.
Cool.
Been going
There you go.
34 days strong now.
Yes.
It's awesome.
All right.
So yeah, that's
That was a strong
The end of the last
finish.
semester.
Strong finish.
yeah.
It's
So
our last one.
all of our dedicated fans have a lovely summer. Stay
I
safe.
know.
Narelle, thank you so much for watching us, Narelle. We love you.
Hit me up on Instagram at Renegade Couture. Just let me know, like for a follow.
Yes!
And
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Smash that like button. Hit the little bell.
Y'all are too much.
some of us will be here next year. Some of us won't. So
When we pass this torch on, y'all, let it soar.
right. But thanks for joining us on our last podcast.
David, I know you're gonna miss me.